On today's episode of the 2Close2Call cast, Pags and I discuss our favorite athletes to wear the number 17 of all time in honor of our 17th episode. We then get into discussing the Duke, North Carolina basketball game and what is potentially the greatest rivalry in college sports. Unfortunately for Zion Williamson, his night ended early after he blew a tire and tore through his Nike shoe, which led to Nike stocks dropping and ultimately a lot of backlash there. Pags and I then discuss if athletes such as Zion Williamson should be paid while in college, since ticket prices last night were rivaling that of the Super Bowl. And we also touch on MLB free agency updates, as Manny Machado has signed a 10-year, $300 million deal with the Padres. However, Bryce Harper still on the open market, and the Phillies still rumored to be in the pole position for his services. After that, we do a little roundabout with Philly sports. We discuss briefly the Sixers and Flyers and what they need to do to round out the second half of their seasons. And we play a little game where we discuss which Philadelphia sports team will be next to win the title. I think you guys are going to like that discussion. We then end the episode with our AAF talk, the Alliance. Almost missing payroll in week 2, bailed out by a $250 million investment by the owner of the Carolina Hurricanes. Will this league make it much longer, or are we going to be fooled again here as they're going to run into budgetary concerns and have to shut down? So we discuss this as well as update our fantasy football rosters and let you guys know what to look for heading into the weekend. But as always, today's episode is brought to you by TheRamKing.com. Visit www.theramking.com for all your t-shirt needs. Anybody out there planning a bachelor or bachelorette party this year? The answer's got to be yes, because I have fucking 8 weddings coming up and multiple bachelor parties, so I will be using the Ram King services to provide some bachelor party tees. He's one of the best of the business in providing any of your t-shirt needs, whether it's sleeveless, cut off, long sleeve, hoodies, whatever it is, whatever the quantity. He has fast lead times, low prices, and is the best t-shirt manufacturer out there. Next time you guys are in need of a shirt to celebrate the situation, visit www.theramking.com for all your t-shirt needs. But without further ado, here's episode 17.
Coach, you were 5-79 last year. Why the playoff talk?
Well, we made a couple of key trades, and we got the funk.
Oh, well, glory be, the funk's on me, Bobby.
Keep that funk alive. Keep that funk alive.
Well, it's 1975, and we'll just be keeping the funk alive. So what
Aloha and hello and welcome to the 17th episode of the 2Close2Call podcast. I'm your co-host as always, Miho, here with my boy Pags. Another week down, Pags. Fridays, come again.
Another one, man. It was a tough week. We had some snow. We had a nice weather day. The weather's keeping us guessing.
Right? Not a lot of sports going on. Basketball didn't have any games all week. Hockey's every other night. It was a slow week in the sports community.
The NBA All-Star Week, after that, man, it is dead.
It is dead. Having said that, though, I think we still got a tremendous episode here for you guys today, starting off with our annual game we play, and that is who is our favorite athlete to wear the number of the current episode. And like I mentioned, we're on number 17, so I'll lead it off, and a couple of different options to run through. Scott Rowland crossed my mind, the old third baseman for the Phillies. However, he's not very well liked around these parts, so I decided to pass on that, right? Ultimately, I'm going to go with another Flyer, and that's Rod Brind'Amour. Played with the Flyers from the early 90s through the early 2000s, and one of my earliest memories of attending a hockey game, I went down to a game they played the Carolina Hurricanes, which is ironic because that's where he actually now coaches for the Hurricanes, right? He got traded there, won a cup, and now he's their coach. But back in the day, it had to be 97, 96, something like that. I remember he scored a goal to win 3-2 with like 56 seconds left in regulation, and I was like, oh, this is awesome. So that was one of the first memories attending a game, which is why, hey, number 17, Mr. Brind'Amour.
Dude, I didn't even know the Hurricanes were a team back then. That's crazy.
Yeah, it was probably early on. Maybe I'm off on that. I'll have to double check it, but for some reason, that's who I think it is. I'm probably wrong now that you're saying that.
I mean, they won it in 03. Imagine they wouldn't win it right away. They came from, the Whalers? Is that right? Or
yeah,
that
the Hartford
Avalanche?
Whalers. One of the best logos in sports, dude. That throwback hat, snapback, fire.
Fire as hell. On my 17, I went Flyers as well. I went Wayne Simmonds, who is
the current Flyer wearing the 17 sweater.
Tough subject right now because there's possibility of him being out of Philly, but I just remember him being the definition of gritty on there. If he needs to fight, he goes out there and he fights. He goes out there, he scraps in there in front of the net, gets the goals. I love him. I love Wayne Simmonds. Going to be one of my top 10 Flyers of all time. Won the All-Star MVP, was an All-Star in 2017. Just a stud. And I also wanted to throw out there maybe J.J. Redick.
So Wayne Simmonds, it sounds like you're on the train of wanting them to re-sign him and not trade him for some assets since he's a pending free agent after this season.
I don't want him to be traded. I love Wayne Simmonds. I want him in Philly forever. I think if they were going to trade him, they would have traded him when his value was a little higher back in, 3-4 years ago. I think they missed the boat of trading him and getting anything plausible back for him.
Well, the reason you're trading him is because you're not re-signing him, which everybody assumes because he's going to get paid in that $6, $7, $8 million range, which is what you're paying Voracek and Giroux. And on this team, they don't have that money because they essentially signed JVR to replace his production as well as his presence in front of the net. So the thinking behind trading him is he's going to walk at the end of the season as a UFA anyway, and you're not making the playoffs. So why would you keep somebody who ultimately can bring you back a mid-round draft pick, third-round, fourth-round pick, and possibly an AHL prospect when he's just going to walk for free at the end of the year?
Is that about where you have him ballparked in, 3-4?
Based on the market and some of the trades and what the insiders are saying who cover the team, the ideal scenario would be, second-round pick, first-round pick, but the more likely scenario is a mid-round pick plus a middle-tier prospect.
I'd take that. I don't know. I don't watch the NHL draft, so I have no idea what you're getting in the third and fourth round pick. So I couldn't tell you on that.
They're not guaranteed to make it, and it's not like football where you're getting Avante Maddox who's going to end up starting for you. Those are definitely projects who turn into your Oscar Lindbloms in 2 to 3 years, your Michael Raffles, those types of contributors.
So they're the guys I'm going to see in Lehigh Valley for a couple of years and go watch them play.
Pretty much, but it's better than nothing. So that's why everybody's saying, hey, maybe you should do it anyway.
I'm on it. Trade his ass.
I like it. But I heard you mention another 17 in there briefly.
I also saw another current Philadelphia player, J.J. Redick.
Oh, is he? Okay. Yeah, that one didn't cross my mind.
Hated him at Duke. I saw him actually break the record for most points scored as a college basketball player at Temple. Went down to I think it was the Wells Fargo Center at the time, maybe the First Union Center. Saw him play there, break the record. He actually had 2 free throws. He had to make one, and he bricked the first one. Ended up making the second one. That was the last points he scored in the game. It was cool to see, and I think he's one of my favorite players. He has a little bit of a hot head on the Philadelphia team right now.
Definitely an underrated contributor for the Sixers team. We saw that the other game he missed where he's going to be a big part down the stretch for them.
Dude, his fadeaway threes, I don't think he ever takes a straight-up jump shot. It's always him leaning one way or the other, and they somehow go in most of the time. And he's unbelievable from the free throw line, which is pretty cool to see.
He definitely practices those threes where he's fading. You see that in pregames coming off all those screens. So it is amazing how his body is still very centered and vertical. However, his motion and his movement are going side to side.
Crazy. I was thinking about that when I picked him for my 3-point competition candidate. And I'm thinking, is he going to lean one way or the other? Is he going to sprint over to the rack and just start leaning? Because those are when he makes them.
Seriously, right? But you mentioned also where he went to school in Duke, and they're in the news today. One of the big stories of the week here, like we mentioned on a slow week, was the game that took place last night at Cameron Indoor Stadium between number 1 Duke and the number 8 North Carolina Tar Heels, where the prices were second this year and were rivaling that of the Super Bowl. So right off the bat, what are your thoughts on the amount of publicity and the pop culture phenomenon that are the Duke Blue Devils?
I think this Duke team is one of the most exciting teams I've ever seen in a college sport. They are must-watch TV, and I think everybody that paid that ridiculous amount of money to get there last night got chipped out of a lot of money. I mean, you had Barack Obama there, you had Ken Griffey Jr. there, you had all kinds of people at that game, and the person everybody came to see blows out a tire in the first minute.
How about that? The fucking Nike shoe, dude. Do you think Nike's sales are going to drop? The stock prices are going to drop because literally the next face probably of their campaign, or who they're hoping is the face of their campaign, rips off his shoe. The entire sole comes off the shoe. Do you think that this has started what will eventually be a bidding war to have his shoes in the NBA, since now Under Armour, Puma, Adidas, all these people can come and say, listen, dude, Nike can't handle you, man. You fucking blew right through their shoe.
Dude, that'd be a great ploy. I mean, even New Balance is getting their way in. They just came out with the new Kawhi Leonards, and those are the most plain shoes I've ever seen in my life.
Just put his name on them, and he's like, here you go, sell them. Perfect.
It's pretty unbelievable that happened. And I like to think that Jordan was just laughing his ass off, like, haha, should have wore Jordans, bitch.
Well, people say this has never happened before, and I thought to myself, yeah, that's because literally a basketball shoe has never had to handle an athlete the size of Zion Williamson. The heaviest guy in the NBA is Boban for the Sixers, and he's like 290, and there's nowhere near the amount of athleticism there. So when you're cutting and trying to transition, the amount of force and pressure, I'm sure ESPN will do a sports science piece on it, but just went right through the shoe, and it's like, holy shit, man, you're going to have to test these on some different people here. This guy's a different animal.
I've never seen that before, and do you think everybody's heart in Cameron just like was in their throat at that point?
They got so lucky it doesn't seem to be serious, and it's come out today that it looks like a mild knee sprain according to Coach K, but even a mild knee sprain can be, 2 to 4 weeks? So if you're Zion, man, are you pushing it to come back at all for March Madness? Even if you are healthy, are you going to play then?
I would like to err on the side of the fact that I think these players do want to win a championship. He's already answered all the questions that people had about he's crazy in high school. Can he translate to playing against better competition? He's answered that, and I think that it's almost guaranteed that he's the number 1 pick next year.
No, I agree with you there. And that's where, to your point, I think him as a person, he probably wants to come back and play just because if you're playing a sport at this level, you obviously love to do it, and it's what you've dedicated your life to, so you're going to enjoy it. But I certainly feel as if his camp, whether it's his family or those agents he's probably been talking to, even though he's not allowed to talk to agents, are probably dude, don't fucking risk this at all, man. Like you mentioned, you're clearly number 1 overall right now, so all you can do is cost yourself money by playing in March Madness. But again, it's a one-and-done league, so this is the only chance he's ever going to get in his life to win a NCAA national championship. So I think you have to weigh those pros and cons.
Yeah, I listened to Jay Billis today, and he was like, it's like as if he stubbed his finger or twisted an ankle. And I'm like, yeah, but I think more the fear in his head, like, shit, that could have been worse.
Yeah, and my fucking shoe blew out, so how am I to think it's not going to happen again?
So do you think with Duke, without Zion, is still a Final Four team?
I don't know, man. I think it may be too late in the season for them to figure out how to play without Zion. We saw last night, obviously they didn't have any practice or anything, but they're clearly not the same team they would be with him, and that's anybody, right, with a guy that with the talents of Zion Williamson. So it's going to take time. Coach K is obviously a fantastic coach, so he's going to be able to reconfigure the pieces to put together a product that's going to be competitive. But ultimately, if you had to put me on the spot right now and pick a Final Four team, I think without Zion Williamson, I may leave them out.
Interesting. Who do you got?
Oh, okay. Let's see. So, like I said, Duke is out for me, but I'm going to say at least one ACC team is going to make it. So I'll put Virginia in now.
Ooh,
even though
back after losing to the 16 seed last year.
I was going to say, right, even though they tend to lose every March, but I'll leave them in. I also have Gonzaga out of the West Coast Conference. I know they've learned how to win in March now and have another good squad. So I think they'll be able to advance again this March. And I'll take another dark horse who started the year as the preseason number 1, fell off, and is now going back to number 2 or number 3, and that's the Kentucky Wildcats.
Nice.
Who just smoked Tennessee when they were ranked number 1 overall. And then, of course, the homer pick for the last one, I'll go with the Michigan Wolverines to make it once again. I think they're going through a little bit of a lull right now, but ultimately they play enough defense, and their guard play from Xavier Simpson when it comes to March time, guards are super important. So I think that will ultimately allow them to advance. And there's your 4, Gonzaga, Virginia, Kentucky, and Michigan. So what do you think? Are those your squads, or how'd I do?
I had a couple of them on my list. I wrote down because I knew I was going to ask you that question. So I do think, based off of last night, mine is strictly with Zion. I think he is going to play.
Okay.
So I think Duke is in there. I did go with your Wolverines. They're a seasoned team that continues to show that they can compete in the Ides of March. And I think that Michigan, I did have Kentucky as well. I've been very impressed with them as of late. And DJ told me, don't sleep on the Wildcats. They are going to be in the Final Four. So I said, okay, DJ, I'll put them in. And then my dark horse, Michigan State, Tom Izzo. I just, for some reason, always, whenever I see the bracket, I'm like, oh, I can't pick against Michigan State. Can't pick them. And they always end up going.
They're top 10 again, so that's another good pick, man. All those teams are certainly Elite 8 Final Four contenders, so I like where your head's at.
Can I give you a really, really dark horse?
Hit me.
Villanova.
No, they stink.
Villanova. Dude, 2 out of the last 3-year champions. You can't sleep on them.
Oh,
I was tough keeping the Tar Heels out of it. I just think they're so inconsistent. I think they'll maybe Elite 8, but I don't see them going to the Final Four.
I like it. We'll be able to update these right when the bracket comes out. We're going to put together a tournament pool where we'll get some entries from you, the listeners, us here, Miho and Pags. We're going to put one together, and we're going to work with the Ram King to hopefully get you guys some free swag if you're able to come out on top and best the both of us.
There it is. Ram King, hook us up with some sweet-ass shirts.
That's it, baby. Hey, and another update for the listeners out there. We can't quite reveal the destination yet. However, our previous guest, DJ Mangus, is in fact employed and did find an opportunity in football this fall. So stay tuned for where he ended up and ultimately, hopefully, another conversation with him. But I figured I'd let you guys know he did, in fact, receive a job. So no longer need to worry out there.
He is employed. Nobody worry. Our man has a payroll.
Let's go.
Speaking of payroll, I wanted to bring this up before with Zion. I've been seeing things all over the media with it. What is your stance on college athletes getting paid?
I think it's time that we pay college athletes. But I don't think it's as simple as it's about time we pay college athletes.
I was like, can you elaborate on what you say about that?
Right, but the amount of money and revenue that in particular, the football teams and at a lot of schools like Duke, Kentucky, the basketball teams bring in, they drive and they carry the rest of the athletic program. And in more particular, a lot of the Olympic sports, myself being a baseball guy, softball, soccer, a lot of the lower revenue, wrestling, things along those lines. So if you pay football athletes, you have to pay these other athletes as well, such as myself. And, baseball's putting in just as much time. Golf is putting in just as much time as football. Now, obviously, it's not as intense and as strenuous as football, but it is still a time commitment, and you are technically working while you're going to school. So the distribution of the revenue and ultimately how much you would get paid is a super complicated question, Pag. So what are your thoughts off the top there? And, we can kind of get into how to distribute the money in a little.
I tend to agree with you. We had talked about this before, and I think a lot of people say, well, base it off of the amount of money that the school brings in based off of each team. Like, for Duke's sake, the basketball players would get paid the most, and the football players probably would be second. But then you got Duke lacrosse that's like, hey, we win fucking national championships every year. We work our ass off. We play all year round. So it does get dicey there. I tend to err on the side of, I don't know. I don't know how you would do it, because you're right. That would just open up a can of worms. Like, we work just as hard as the football players, but then the football players like, yeah, but we have 100,000 people coming to our games on Saturdays. You guys have fucking maybe eighth of that.
You also have revenue sharing between conferences when it comes to bowl seasons for football.
Right.
Like the ACC shares all of the revenue it gets from those bowl affiliations. So is each school splitting that revenue equally across the board? It's very complicated. And I think the answer ultimately, just specifically in basketball, you brought it up because of Zion, and that's why they're moving to it in a year or two. But you got to let these kids go right out of high school who are physically able to play in the NBA.
Absolutely. Sebastian Telfair, he was supposed to go to Memphis. And I was watching the Kentucky Calipari 30 for 30, and Calipari was like, come to Memphis. And he was like, well, and then his career ended in 2 years, but he made a ton of money.
Right.
So it is unfair if that would have happened at Memphis. It's like, oh, shit, what the fuck do I do?
It's definitely going to be a conversation that needs to be had, and ultimately I think it's where it is going with the game. There's just too much money involved in the way society continues to evolve. I think ultimately people are just going to start getting paid for their services beyond the free education, which is what the NCAA is basically arguing that they're paying for now.
What would a number be? Like, what are we even talking about, like, number-wise? Like
1%, 2% of all revenue distributed to the athletes, and free school, a couple $1,000s. I mean, at the very least, dude, they should be paying for like food and housing for all off-campus athletes.
Agreed. I mean, we got a stipend of it with our scholarship. We got a certain amount of money to go towards our housing off campus if we chose to live off campus. So we got some of that, but it was always like, okay, here's your rent, here's your utilities. You still don't have any money.
Just a bunch of broke college athletes out here trying to make it.
Please stop! I'm with you! You gonna fuck on me? Nobody's gonna fuck on you! We're on your side! I hate Godzilla! I hate him too! I hate him! He destroys cities! Please! This isn't your fault. I'll get you some pants. Oh!
Yeah, man. Speaking of being broke, someone who is not broke, Manny Machado. Dude got paid.
$300 million to go play in California and San Diego.
That's just like the ultimate, I don't give a fuck where I play. I just want to get paid and chill.
Did you think he was going to end up getting $300 million, or were you surprised when you saw that news come out?
I thought he was going to go lower than 300 just based off of the whole Johnny Hustle thing last year and just kind of the persona that he doesn't really care. I thought he was going to get lowballed a little bit, but hey, the Padres were like, hey, we need people to come. We lost our Chargers, so we need a big hit and big splash, and they got it.
Yeah, I definitely was surprised to see that two things happened. First, I was surprised to see that, to your point, the Padres were willing to go to the 10-year, $300 million mark. I do think Manny Machado is worth that amount of money. The comments didn't help him, so I don't think it will be a bust of a contract, but the more surprising thing that I took away from the news was Machado actually blinking first and signing before Harper, which was super surprising because everything you hear in the news right now is all about Harper and the Phillies. You didn't hear a freaking word about Machado at all, and then all of a sudden it's, hey, he agreed to a deal. It's like, well, where the fuck did that come from?
Yeah, it was really out of nowhere. I remember just driving, and you called me like, hey, Machado signed. I was like, what?
Right? You didn't hear anything.
Did not expect that at all.
But the Phillies, the Phillies miss out on it. Matt Klentak coming out in a press conference afterwards basically saying that the money for Machado exceeded our evaluation of the player. Were you surprised by that? And then I guess a follow-up question as well is, if Bryce Harper is going to exceed Machado as well as Giancarlo Stanton and get into that $340, $350, potentially $400 million range, do you think the Phillies have Harper evaluated at that much money, or is it going to be because we're fucking starving as fans for a superstar, and it's you better pay this or we're going to be pissed.
I got worried when I saw Clintack's response to that because it made me think like, hey, Philly fans, be prepared. We're not willing to pay this much money to a player.
That's what it sounded like, right?
And it made me very, very nervous because the Phillies have made a ton of awesome moves this year. But I'm worried that as soon as Harper signs somewhere else, everyone's going to view this offseason as a disappointment. And it shouldn't be because they made some unbelievable moves this year.
What would you grade the offseason if they don't get Harper, or I guess currently, up until any more recent moves, because there's rumblings of Keuchel and Kimbrel if they get the money or have the money. So I guess what would you grade them thus far, obviously with it being an incomplete, so to speak?
Well, based off of them not having to spend a lot of money and only shipping one player worth a damn out, I'd give them an A. You got to give them an A. They barely spend any money, and they revamped their entire roster almost.
I'm with you on that. The moves themselves are AA plus moves. As a whole, for the program or the organization, I would give it a B plus because ultimately you're running, 5 starters back out there who you're hoping take the next step. You're a little thin there. You spent a little bit on relievers, but I'm with you. It's certainly been impressive. So if they're adding Harper or Keuchel or any of those guys, obviously it's an A plus plus in your world, huh?
Absolutely. It's the gravy on top. I think Harper being added would just vault them to NL East potential World Series, at least being in the World Series.
What do you think about Harper and the reports of him being, quote-unquote, hesitant to come to Philadelphia for the next decade?
It makes me nervous. It makes me – we saw this with LeBron last year. It's just been like we have this delusion that – we're so Philadelphia biased that we think, oh, why wouldn't somebody want to come play here? It's an awesome sports town. The fans, they love you. What has happened and what has transpired the last couple of years makes me think otherwise, and it kind of sucks.
Because the media and the passion is almost a double-edged sword. We have people like Howard Eskin fucking tweeting at Bryce Harper saying, hey, if you want to play for a good organization and enjoy the game this much, you'd already be here. So it's clearly all about the money. And yeah, the athletes don't read their Twitter, but there's no way he didn't see that. And he's probably like, well, fuck that guy. I don't want to go there for 10 years and deal with this shit. Like, if I don't bring them a title or we suck for a couple of years, I'm going to be the villain and the scapegoat that everybody's going to point to.
I agree with that. I think it's kind of a bitch move by these players. Be like, dude, deal with the media. Go out there and fucking win. That's what you're supposed to do. This isn't the Washington media where they've seen such dreck in the past 10, 15 years. This is fucking Philadelphia. We're here. We're going to win games, and we want to win a championship. We hold you accountable for that. I don't agree with Eskin fucking, especially in the middle of trying to sign this dude. But hey, that's what you got to deal with when you come to Philadelphia. And I do think that LeBron, that was kind of something that he was like, oh, dude, I don't want to deal with that.
I was going to say, hearing you right now makes me think, this is why Machado signed for $300 million to go in San Diego where nobody gives a shit.
Go sit on the beach.
Right? Like, it's crazy, dude. It's passion. That's at least what we label it as. But as a person who's not raised in this or born locally, such as a lot of these baseball players, they're like, dude, I owe nothing to Philadelphia. Like, if you're going to fuck me, well, fuck you. You know what I'm saying? So that whole accountability piece, yeah, this is what we do here. They're like, no, I get that, but I don't want to fucking deal with it.
All they have to do is look and see what happens. And I think Embiid and Simmonds kind of got a taste of that, and they fell in love with it because they were coming up when the Eagles won a Super Bowl and how the city just embraces it and how awesome it is. You never have to buy a drink in the city again if you do that. Ask the 2008 Phillies.
Seriously, right? Still the toast of the town. But you brought up Embiid there, and it triggered a thought in my head, like, what the fuck, man? He plays in the All-Star game, and now he's got to sit out a week because he's sore? We just had a week off. What the hell's the deal?
Speaking of Philadelphia media, that's all I've heard the last couple days.
Yeah, right? And we're pounding this. Like, are you fucking kidding me? It's like, oh, this is exactly what we're talking about.
It just sucks because they got some big games coming up that they need to win. I don't want to get stuck in the 4-5 game with the Celtics. And these are games they could easily win with Embiid. And it's like, oh, you're sitting out a week, but you played in the All-Star game? Like, that sucks.
Right, and Furkan Korkmaz, he's out with a torn meniscus for some time. And Zaire Smith, who we've talked about, hoping to come off the bench. The reports are that he's going to finish the season in Delaware and come back next year due to the amount of weight he's lost and all the complications from the surgery he had. So not a good start for an off week in fucking Philadelphia Sixers land.
Brett Brown comes out and he tries to explain the situation. Like, if you sit out more than 1 week, it's bad for the injury. Yeah, well, no, you need to rest, and then you get out and you play when you need to play. You don't need to play in an all-star game. I get it. Embiid wants to be around there. He wants to show that he's one of the top NBA players, and I love that. But when it sacrifices to your ultimate goal, I'm not down with that.
Well, that's maybe why he sucked, right? What was he, like 4 of 13 and had like 9 points or whatever? It's like, holy shit.
He really does have an effect of whether I'm excited about a Sixers game or not, because I'm like, okay, I'm going to watch some beadless Sixers for the next couple of days. I was really looking forward to Tobias Harris.
I was going to say, we're okay now,
Butler,
dude. We have a team beyond Embiid, so you could still be excited to watch Butler, Harris, and Simmons. It's okay.
I know, but the whole thing is what we talked about last episode is watching them bend together, and if he's out a week or two, it's like, oh, shit. You got to wait a little bit more to see them, see if they can mesh. And Embiid's the main one because he's the one that touches the rock the most of the time.
I did think of you in your 29-game spiel when I saw he's going to miss a week. I was like, oh, how many are they going to have now? 20? Well, that's not enough.
Exactly. We're going to have to figure it out and scratch and claw through the first round to get to that 29 games. Hey, guys, let's go to 7 games with the New Jersey Nets because we need the practice before we get to the Celtics.
Just getting more reps in. That's all that's going on.
Yeah, we're going to blow these 2 games in New Jersey and we know we can beat them in Philadelphia, so we're going to win all 4 of those.
I like it. This weekend, we also have something to look forward to, and that is I want to say Winter Classic, but it's the Stadium Series between the Flyers and Penguins, the outdoor event at Lincoln Financial Field in the Eagles Stadium. So are you excited at all about outdoor hockey, or has the amount of outdoor games kind of made it lose its luster?
Oh, I love watching it. I think it's awesome. I think if the weather holds up, I don't know how much it affects it. I just think it's cool to watch, see all the fans out there. I went to the one when it was in Citizens Bank. I actually saw the Phantoms play the Hershey Bears, and even that was awesome to watch.
Now, where did you sit for that game?
Upper deck.
Could you see the puck at all, or were you too far away to even see what's going on? Because part of me is like, yeah, that's fun, but if I'm in the fucking upper level of a football stadium, how the hell am I supposed to see a puck that's like a 3-inch diameter?
Honestly, it's kind of cool. I don't know anything about hockey plays and shit like that. And Smith was there explaining to me, like, yo, look at the spacing, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, ah. So as a sports fan just going for the experience, probably not. But if you're somebody that's willing to learn about a sport, it is cool to watch.
I agree with you. I enjoy it. And you did mention, as of now, they're calling for a bunch of rain, so it's going to be a sloppy game, which probably benefits the Flyers since they can't seem to beat the Penguins. And based off of that, Pags, I'm going to give you a take 2 here from a couple weeks ago. And I'm going to ask you, what do you think's going to happen when the Flyers and Penguins play?
Oh, God. It's going to be a gritty game. That's what I'll give you.
Nice.
It's going to be outside and gritty. I don't want to give any predictions on Flyer Pens because I was so wrong last time. Hey, I wasn't wrong in the fact that they dominated them. They just didn't put the puck in the net.
That is true. You did have that. And based off of that, I think the Flyers will actually bounce back and take this one. I don't know how good I feel about their game against Montreal in between this, but giving Carter Hart another opportunity, maybe showing off a little bit, national primetime Saturday, I think the Flyers could squeak this one out, but it's going to be a competitive game that could go either way late, and fucking Sidney Crosby just always seems to be in the right place at the right time.
Oh, there's going to be so many people booing him. Crosby sucks chants all over the place. It's going to be awesome.
Right? So, but we mentioned in the opening of the show that the reason to trade Wayne Simmonds is because the Flyers most likely not make the playoffs. I know they have like a 3% chance.
Don't hold off my bold prediction.
That's it.
I'm still on it.
well, your 3%'s coming in hot here. So this year it doesn't.
Your bold prediction with Harper is in question right now.
That's true. That's true. But having said all that, it looks like the Flyers are not going to hoist Lord Stanley this year. And the Sixers still have a chance, probably better chance than the Flyers, but Which organization out of the four? I know we dropped this on the social media yesterday, got some nice feedback from you guys, so we appreciate that. But who do you see bringing the next trophy down Broad Street? Who's going to be our next parade? Which color are we going to be wearing?
I think it's going to be green again. And this is speaking from a guy who realizes the fact that it took 50-some years for that to happen.
It's only happened once, Pax.
Yeah, well, they won the championship. It's not just the Super Bowl. I think it'll be the Birds. I think this year really benefited this team. And I think, I'm not saying it's going to happen this year. We may have to wait a year or two. Shows how much faith I have in the rest of the teams in the city. But, yeah, I think it'll be the Eagles. If I rank them right here, I put Eagles, Phillies, Sixers, Flyers.
Okay. I was going to say, based on your last comment, taking a year or two, that would change it for my prediction, because one of my bold predictions as well is I have the Sixers winning it all next June. So that literally leaves the only option of the Eagles next fall. And like you mentioned, it's so fucking hard to win the Super Bowl, where I certainly think they have a really good chance to do it, but I'm not going to predict it. So I'll stick with my bold prediction and take the Sixers. Now, the question I was debating with internally was, who is second on that list? Is it the Phillies, which I think it may be if they get Harper and or Keuchel, and then the Eagles, but I think those two are very comparable, and in 2 to 3 years we'll both be competing. So I'm going Sixers, Phillies, Eagles, Flyers.
I remember 3 years ago, after the Drek, we made it through the shittiness of Philadelphia sports. You told me 2020 was the year of all Philadelphia sports competing for a championship. Do you still agree? All four?
It could be. That's what I'm saying. The Flyers are lining up with the goalie for a year or two. The Phillies in a year or two. Sixers, Eagles, they're all going to be competitive. So maybe I'll backtrack a little bit and just say 3 out of 4. But I think 4 out of 4 are going to be at least under like 15-1 odds.
And the Eagles gave us a nice little treat.
That's it, a little appetizer, right?
Yeah. They're like, here's what it feels like, Philadelphia. And we're like, ooh, we want more.
If I could save time in a bottle, first thing that I'd like to do is to save every day till eternity passes away, just to spend them with you.
Are you guys seriously this calm?
Relax, Stuart. It's classic switcheroo. I give him money, he gives us Teddy.
You ever do anything that doesn't end up in a standoff, Chow?
I'm an international criminal. It always ends like this. I met my wife at one of these things.
You have a wife?
Yeah, we married 15 years. What, Chow not good looking enough for a woman?
Speaking of championships, dude, there may not even be a championship for the first year of the Alliance. Did you see they could barely fucking make payroll? What was your take on that?
It made me lose faith in the fact that we may have football in the spring if they can't even pay their players.
How do you plan a league and not be able to fucking pay your guys weeks 1 or 2? Like, isn't that one of the first things you got to dive into the budget?
I would think that. I mean, who knows? Who knows what the hell is going on? It could very well just be easy as somebody just fucked up and the players are going to get paid. I don't think that's the case, but hey, maybe.
Yeah, right? That's what the league itself is saying. It was just a glitch in software, and then all of a sudden you see a report of $250 million coming in from an investor to essentially buy his way to CEO. So it's kind of like, are you sure about that?
It's a sticky situation. I'm glad I'm not involved in it. But you know what did have a championship in the AAF? Our uniform battle.
Oh, let's go! The inaugural championship!
The San Diego Fleet take down my team, the Birmingham Iron. It was a significant win. Over 70% of the people liked the San Diego Fleet. So
it must be that fucking ship on the helmet, man. I think that's what people are getting.
It is cool.
The listeners finally were on my side, Pags, and said, you know what? He's right. That fucking uniform from any given Sunday is the Birmingham Iron.
I think there was tampering involved. I think you fucked with the listeners' views when they were like, oh, that's true. We've never seen the Birmingham Iron away uniforms. And I'm like, damn it.
That's right. I changed the algorithm up, and now we got a new result.
I had the Fleet as my third favorite when I ranked them in the beginning. So, hey.
I like it.
Those are some solid uniforms. Congratulations to the San Diego Fleet. You won something.
That's right. And thanks to all you listeners and voters out there. We appreciate the interaction. It was a lot of fun running that tournament. Another thing we're doing here, which I'm having a lot of fun with, but maybe ending soon if there's not a fucking league, which is it's week 3 of the AAF, but week 2 in our fantasy football battle. So this is Friday's episode. Like we mentioned, this will be the episode where we make adjustments to our rosters. Mr. Loser, do you have any adjustments to make for week 2?
My team needs to win because if this league's going down, I'm not losing them. I'll take a tie. I'm not losing this fantasy league. I'm going to stick with my entire team, except I'm going to switch my quarterbacks. I'm going with Gilbert, and I'm taking out the Iron quarterback. So I'm going to go with the Apollo's quarterback, Gilbert, and put him in at my starting quarterback position and take Perez from the Iron out.
I was going to say, I think that's a good move because I'm pretty sure Gilbert was named Offensive Player of the Week for the AAF.
Yeah, so that means he's going to suck this week, and I'm going to be pissed.
Right, exactly. So one of the obvious moves I'll make is at running back, where my guy Hunt had minus rushing yards last week, and I'm going to replace him with Zach Stacy, who scored a touchdown and probably is going to be the main focal point of that offense because Hackenberg continues to suck for the Express. So I think Stacy's going to find pay dirt again.
Dude, I saw an article say, like, is the AAF good for Hackenberg to change his game up and become a NFL quarterback? And I'm like, have these people watched this dude?
Are they watching film at all?
Yeah, it's just hot take shit out there. It was just funny to read.
Right, and the second and final move I'm going to make, and I'll need your assistance because I don't have it in front of me, but my tight end last week didn't score any fucking points for me, so that'll earn you a seat on the bench. So whoever my backup is, because I know we picked him, put them in there.
So you're taking out the best name in the entire
yeah, number one
Bug
name,
Howard.
0 points.
Bug Howard is on the bench, and Denham.
Oh, that's a good name, too. There we go. Perfect.
Denham. I don't have first name. I just have Denham.
That's all you need. That's what he goes by.
I actually have it spelled wrong, too. It's Denham, and I have written down Denim.
Denham.
Denham. So, yeah, I'll post those on our social media account, and you guys can follow along. Hopefully my team has a bounce back, so we'll see.
Unfortunately, this week we don't have a guest again for you guys. We had one of our friends have something pop up in his schedule, which I guess is understandable considering he's playing in the Alliance and currently in the middle of a football season. So we're continuing to work to try to get him on as soon as we can. We're hoping that there's going to be a time in between this week and next to get him on. However, I have also worked to secure a backup guest. So don't you worry, people out there, listeners of the Too Close to Call cast. We're going to have our interviews back next week.
We are going to dive into Jerome a little bit more. Our friend Jerome, who's playing for the Apollos right now, actually played in Philadelphia under Chip Kelly, so I'm excited to ask him questions about that as well.
Like we mentioned, man, that's our 17th episode. Wrapping it up for you here. We got a weekend coming up. My daughter Isabella, we're having her first birthday party.
Lizzie.
Yeah, first birthday party. She turned 1 yesterday. So we're going to have a bunch of our friends in the studio here. We're going to record a bunch of different clips, maybe ask them a bunch of hot take questions, get their thoughts, and we'll run a little bit of a mailbag podcast for next week.
I love that. I can't wait. I really can't wait to figure out what questions we're going to ask these people and what their responses are going to be. It's going to be fun. Maybe James will have his first words on our podcast, full sentence.
That's it. All he needs is a microphone in front of his face, and then he'll be good to go.
Because all I'm hearing right now is blah, 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 blah.
As always, guys, most importantly out there, follow us on our Instagram, Too Close to Call Cast. That's the number 2 both times. Twitter, Facebook. We're out there on all your podcast platforms, iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play. So give us a follow, like our page. We appreciate it. We'll interact with you guys, get in our comments, and have yourselves a wonderful weekend.
Later, guys.
Peace.